Welcome back, everybody, to Urban Odyssey. This is part 3 of the 6G white paper breakdown. I hope you didn't get too comfortable with the first two sections because now we're going to get into the meat of the whole thing. All this and more after the intro.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Alrighty, guys. I hope everybody's doing well. This section is section 3 of the 6G white paper that we have been going over. This third part deals with what you're seeing on the screen now called Terahertz Band radiation. It's extremely important, and so this section is going to be just a little bit longer, and I hope people are able to kind of refer back to this in the future. Because terahertz is going to pop up probably in everything from this point on. And that was a big motivating factor for me doing this series, was that I wanted to offer insight and information that can be referred back to for things that will be popping up often. And that's another reason why I've been very into the words and stuff behind that. And so we're going to do some of that as well. So I wanted to start off with this graphic here because it's a pretty nice graphic. The Terahertz Band, figure 3. The Terahertz Band offers hundreds of gigahertz per second usable spectrum resources for wireless communication links and long, medium, short, indoor, and near field range. And so if you see here, I'll turn that down a little bit. The radio waves are at the left hand. Those are what look to be the largest sized waves, or I think that's 10 to the 6th 1 megahertz. Then you have microwaves, which that looks like 10 to the 9, so that's 1 with 9 zeros. And then you have millimeter waves right here in that little striped section. And the terahertz band, which is in the orange, it is from 10 to the 11th to 10 to the 13th. So it fills the gap between millimeter waves on the left and infrared spectrum waves on the right. And it was very important because they were trying to get over that issue sort of as a hurdle. It stood in the way for a long period of time, and then once terahertz came around, it was, as it will likely say when I begin to read the section, one of the things that allowed them to start working on this. So, with that said, first, what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm going to pull up the Devil's Dictionary by Nab Whitehouse. We're going to look up terahertz in the Devil's Dictionary. Alright, so here we are on the Devil's Dictionary. This is available at the same place, husbandry.officialurban.com, or the link will be in the description. Anab-whitehouse.com is the author. He has a handful of other sources and texts that are available from his website. So, terahertz radiation. The term terahertz refers to frequencies that are in the order of 10 to the 12th cycles per second. Terahertz radiation refers to frequency phenomena which occurs in a space where microwave and infrared forms of electromagnetic radiation overlap to a degree, and the space where this overlap takes place is referred to as terahertz radiation. This form of radiation is considered to be non-ionizing. That's a very important characteristic here, so I'll highlight it, non-ionizing, which means that it does not contain sufficient energy to displace electrons from a molecule and thereby ionize that molecule. Since ionizing radiation is considered to be biologically destructive or injurious, non-ionizing radiation is often considered to be a safe alternative to radiation that is ionizing in nature. However, a great deal of research by Arthur Furstenberg, Samuel Millam, Josh DeSole, Beverly Rubrick, those are the authors, has indicated that this non-ionizing radiation entails its own set of potential problems. And that's a big part of everything we're seeing today, is that this has not been done in recorded human history, and so we don't really have anything to go off. We're basically just guinea pigs in the most pure sense with respect to the health of all manner of biological organisms. Consequently, to refer to terahertz waves as non-ionizing form of radiation doesn't necessarily mean it is safe to be used in conjunction with, say, human beings or biological environment that surrounds human beings. Nanoscale devices have been developed and are continuing to be developed, which have healthcare applications. You're going to hear that a lot, healthcare applications. And maybe there are a small amount of healthcare applications, people who have informed consent or whatnot. But I tend to think, and unless I can see something that convinces me otherwise, when they say healthcare applications, I think that's just kind of an umbrella term, and it kind of means whatever they deem, whatever they can say. Oh, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, then it's for a healthcare application. So it seems nice and innocent, but applied linguistics and words are used to trick people, spells, if you will. In order for such devices to be of value, they have to be capable of two-way communication. Terahertz frequencies have been introduced as a form of radiation which would be characterized by low energy features and would be able to exhibit precision localization in conjunction with, among other things, such tasks as targeted drug delivery, basically wireless. They'll just use this technology to put the drugs in you without you having to take any medicine, take any anything. It's just wireless. They do have this technology, and I'm sure we will get into that in future parts. Localization is another important term. Localization just means making something work in a specific environment. So let's say you want to tailor some psychological operation, just as an example, to Columbus, Ohio. You want it to fit and be localized to Columbus, Ohio. So you would, tailor it for the people who live there. That's a very simple example. Putting aside the issue of whether or not terahertz radiation's non-ionizing property constitutes a hazard, short-term and or long-term, to biological organisms, one could also raise questions about whether or not the drugs which are released through a targeted form of delivery are necessarily in the best interests of the patient. So that's basically what I had just said. The delivery system entails one set of questions and issues, and that which is being delivered gives expression to another set of questions and issues. Yeah, that's a very good point. Let's see, highlight that too. So he says the delivery system entails one set of questions and issues, and then that which is being delivered gives you another set of questions and issues. So they're, as is the case often, they create more problems than there were by trying to make their enlightened solution. Aside from the issues surrounding the technology of delivery and the nature of the drug that is being delivered, there is a third set of questions and issues which arise in conjunction with the ability to send commands to such a delivery device. This has to do with the theory of medicine which governs the use of such devices and drugs. Viruses have not been proven to exist. If one is using terahertz radiation to send commands to a nanoscale device to release an antiviral form of medication or treatment, then perhaps there are some other questions and issues which need to be addressed as well. One might also ask whether nanotechnology is necessarily the best approach to the issues of health, or whether nanotechnology is even compatible with health. A lot depends on what one considers to be the nature of the disease and health, the nature of disease and health to be. And from a certain perspective, nanotechnology is not only highly invasive, or as they call it, pervasive, but might be basically what I just said, and I actually didn't read this before I started recording. Highly invasive, but might be counterproductive to the way in which, for example, the epigenetic system or the biofield operate. Epigenetics, I remember there's a distinction in psychology. It was that epigenetics has to do with how genes are expressed in certain environments. And I might look that up in a minute too. If not, I'll put the definition in the description. Finally, there is an elephant in the room. All too many doctors were willing to make claims during the so-called COVID pandemic concerning what COVID was and how it should be diagnosed or how it should be treated. Those claims were not necessarily based on either good science or sound constructive medical clinical practice. Consequently, there is a monumental trust problem that has developed with respect to many dimensions of health and medical systems. The foregoing trust issue is exacerbated by the arrogance of medical health practitioners who believe that they have the right to force people to abide by medical theories which lack scientific rigor and cannot withstand even a moderate form or critical reflection concerning the claims which are being made through the promulgation of those sorts of theories. Diagnostic errors in prescribed medicines account for hundreds, that deserves a highlight, hundreds of thousands of deaths each year, and have been doing so for decades. If any other group of people caused this kind of carnage, war would have been declared against them long ago. But apparently, such people have become, and not for reasons that can be justified, a legally protected species. Isn't that the truth? When considering issues like terahertz radiation, nanoscale devices, and targeted drug delivery that can be directed through wireless forms of communication, one must place such issues in an appropriate evidential context. Moreover, given that evidential context, one can't help but ask what such people are really up to, because despite the hype, what is being pushed through bio-nanotechnology raises a lot of questions which are not being adequately addressed by health and medical practitioners. And so that is all from terahertz in the Devil's Dictionary, and I highly encourage you guys to download this. It is in the Synergist manual that I've showed you. It's also available on its own, and it's free for everybody. So some of the definitions are a few years old and could use a little bit of modern context, but the Devil's Dictionary is probably one of, if not the best resource for learning about this stuff. So with that said, let's go back over to the white paper, and we'll go ahead and we will get into that. So this is the last section from the last video, starting off at section 3, Terahertz Band Communications. As is the case, I will kind of skip over certain parts, and some I will read fully. I encourage you guys to do some of your own digging and look into this more, because there's if you just go through some resources, there's a lot of information on it. The only issue is that people just don't know this exists, and that really goes to show clearly for me that this is being done kind of with malicious intent. Because if this was really revolutionary, like they're hyping it up to be, you would think that this would be something we're telling everybody, or we would have something like a World's Fair to show this off, like we did 100 years ago. But that's not happening, because if people really understood this, like I hope you will by the end of my series of videos on this, it would not be good. All right, without further ado, let's get started. We are going to begin right here. Recent years have witnessed a dramatic rise in wireless data traffic brought forth by numerous exciting technologies in wireless communications. This exponential growth has been accompanied by the demand for higher data rates and better coverage. Among emerging research and development trends in wireless communications, Terahertz Band, which is 0.1 through 10 terahertz. And 1 second, let me get this little note that I kept and I'll read it to you because it'll help us with that. Okay, yeah, so this right here, this was something that was sent to me by Juxtaposition. He said terahertz and megahertz are both units of frequency, but they differ significantly. The terahertz is equal to 1 trillion cycles per second. Megahertz is equal to 1 million cycles per second. Therefore, 1 terahertz is equal to 1 million megahertz. And so that's your, your conversion factor. So back to the article. Has been envisioned as one of the key enabling technologies for the next decade. Buoyed by availability of ultra-wide spectrum resources, the terahertz band can provide terabits per second, TBPS, links for a plethora of applications ranging from ultra-fast, massive data transfer among nearby devices in terabit wireless personal and local area networks to high-definition video conferencing among mobile devices and small cells. Recently, the Federal Communications Commission has released the frequency bands above 95 gigahertz for research purposes, while a handful of cellular operators have adapted low millimeter frequency or wave frequencies for their 5G services with the intention of achieving a maximum data rate of 100 gigabits per second. The test results thus far leave much to be desired, showing a peak data rate of around 1 gigabytes per second or gigabits per second. This gap between the targeted and practically achievable data rates is influenced by multiple factors, including a high complexity and realistic communication channels, imperfections in circuitry design, and interference from other systems operating in adjacent frequency bands, among others. Nevertheless, even though the terahertz bands have been applied in imaging and object detection, as well as for terahertz radiation spectroscopy and astronomical research, their use cases in wireless communications are still under investigation. Lying between the millimeter wave spectrum and infrared light spectrum, as shown in Figure 3, which is what we looked at the beginning of the video, terahertz bands with their abundant spectrum resources have been previously deemed as no man's land. However, major progress in the domains of transceiver and antenna design has seen terahertz links become a promising option for realizing indoor communications networks. More recently, there has been significant progress on realizing wireless network on chip, or WNOC, using terahertz bands. And again, remember this paper was from down in the left corner there, 2020. So almost 6 years later is you can only really imagine. So it'll get into some of the use cases. Different from wireless networks at low frequencies, terahertz band wireless communications has several unconventional application scenarios owing to the distant electromagnetic and photonics characteristics of this tremendously high frequency band, in addition to the terabits per second level links for cellular systems. Terahertz band spectrum can also be leveraged for the following scenarios. Local area networks. Several spectrum windows are feasible for short range links within 10 meters, including 625 to 725 gigahertz, 780 to 910 gigahertz. Terahertz band communications is expected to form the terahertz optics bridge to enable seamless transition between fiber optics and terahertz band links with zero latency. Personal area networks. Terahertz band communications can provide fiber-like data rate without the need of multiple wires between multiple devices and at a distance of a few meters. Such communications scenarios can be found in indoor offices and multimedia kiosks. Data center networks. Conventional data centers manage and maintain connectivity in wired networks using cables, resulting in high costs in terms of both installation and reconfiguration. On the other hand, terahertz links provide promising prospects for seamless connectivity at ultra high speeds and fixed network and adaptability for hardware reconfiguration. Wireless network on chip. As the trend in transceiver hardware development motivates a higher level of integration and miniaturization as well as weight reduction, the terahertz band links can serve as a promising candidate to establish wireless communications or connections among different modules within the transceiver chassis in order to replace the wired connections commonly found in existing transceiver hardware products. Nano networks, with its wavelength falling in the nanometer or 10 to the negative ninth, which anytime you see a negative exponent, what you do is you turn it into a 1 over. So if you see 10 to the negative 9, what that really means is 1 over 10 to the ninth, which means instead of adding zeros after the 1, you're adding zeros before the 1. So it's very, very, very small. The terahertz band can operate better than any other frequencies in nano networks. Within this context, a nano network is a set of interconnected nano devices or nano machines for information exchange, storage, and computation. More detailed overview can be found in section 11, and we will eventually get there. Inter-satellite communications. Lying largely outside the Earth's atmosphere, inter-satellite links are not constrained by atmospheric attenuation, which makes the terahertz band a favorable candidate for such communication links. Compared to existing spectrum resources allocated for inter-satellite links, the terahertz band has a much wider bandwidth, which can accommodate more satellites and achieve higher link performance. Unlike the widely used optical links, the terahertz band does not impose stringent requirements on beam alignment, which can help maintain a high level of link stability as satellites drift in or drift out of their orbits. And that's something that is going to come up soon, is this idea of terahertz. The issue is that the beams go kind of random ways, and so they need a way, and they have since found a way to do what's called beam steering, so they can kind of control the paths that these beams are taking, which this stuff is just insane. I mean, for me, 26 years old, grew up with all the technology and stuff, this is still hard for me to wrap my mind around, and I'm sure it is for a lot of you guys as well. And that's why I hope that we can kind of understand this together. So the next section be devices in the terahertz band. The need for higher output power, lower phase noise, and better receiving sensitivity in terahertz band transceivers has driven advances in corresponding device development. Currently, 3 main directions are deployed in terahertz band signal generation. And I'm going to highlight that or underline it. Photonics-based, electronics-based, and emerging material-based respectively. The 3 main directions are deployed in terahertz band signal generation: photonics-based, electronic-based, and emerging material-based respectively. So, starting on the right column here, in the photonics-based approach, many 3V semiconductors, including gallium arsenide, which is GaAs, and indium phosphide, or InP, which provide high electron mobility, are excellent candidates, especially for high frequency, i.e. above 100 gigahertz applications. Such photonics-based techniques generate time domain pulses with lengths of femtoseconds. A femtosecond, I've never heard of that before, but that's 10 to the negative 15, or 1 over 10 to the 15th. 0, so it would be 15 zeros before the 1, and that would be like a 0.15 zeros 1, so very small. And experimental works have demonstrated 50 gigabits per second data links in an indoor scenario at 300 gigahertz using the uni-traveling carrier photodiode UTC-PD technique. The UTC-PD and modified UTC-PD structures an effective photomixing solution, which allows wider spectrum tuning and simpler construction compared to laser pulse generators, has pushed the output signal range from 300 gigahertz to 2.5 terahertz with output powers of 10 to the microwatt, I think is what that is, or maybe that's nano. Let me make sure real quick so I'm not giving you the wrong information. Okay, so the little symbol here means micro, so that's 10 microwatts at 300 gigahertz and 1 microwatt at 1 terahertz. Let me make sure I got that right. It has pushed the output signal range from 300 gigahertz to 2.5 terahertz with output powers of 10 microwatts at 300 gigahertz and 1 microwatt at 1 terahertz. Additionally, a design based on slot antenna integrated UTC-PD. Again, a UTC-PD is a uni-traveling carrier photodiode. A uni-traveling carrier photodiode, UTC-PD, has shown superior performance in generated terahertz band signal strengths at 350 to 850 gigahertz and 900 gigahertz to 1.6 terahertz compared to that of the bow tie antenna integrated UTC-PDs. Similar photonics-based terahertz signal generation at above 1 terahertz can be realized using quantum cascade lasers and other solid-state lasers. However, the operations of such devices are limited at room temperatures, requiring liquid helium cooling, which affects their deployment in local area networks with space restrictions. Furthermore, photoconductive antennas, PCAs, have been utilized widely for both pulse and continuous wave signal generation at terahertz band, demonstrating a wide spectrum up to 4.5 terahertz with remarkable dynamic range of up to 100 dB. Maybe decibels, I'm not sure on that. Okay, that section I'm going to finish up with because a lot of that, I'm perfectly honest with you, I don't follow that very well. It's giving you a lot of information of output and generation, and they're using literally things that I just can't even conceive of to do this. So if anybody knows more about that than I do or has any comments on that, please feel free to leave them. I am curious to hear from people who may have more experience with that topic. So let's go to, yeah, we're going to just skip over to D, medium access control, which is a MAC address, a medium access control in terahertz band communications. On top of physical layer channel models, the medium access control schemes in terahertz band communications should adopt spatial and spectral features in order to provide solutions in resolving issues as the deafness problem and LOS blockage, amongst others. Different from commonly used MAC solutions in RF systems that utilize omnidirectional antennas such as carrier sense multiple access with collision avoidance, which the acronym is CSMA/CA, the MAC protocols designed for terahertz bands rely on handshakes between transceivers with highly directional beams. These razor-sharp beams can provide higher power radiation gain and prolong the transmission distance. But when misalignment happens, the deafness problem arises. As such, the deafness avoidance approach is required in MAC schemes. Existing solutions utilized in IEEE 802. These are the IEEE schemes are have to do with basically how different types of waves are communicated. I think that's a very basic way to put it. They call them schemes, they call them formats, standards, And I do think this paper actually is by IEEE Access. Let's see. Existing solutions utilized in the IEEE standard 802.15.3c and others employ a beam training phase to estimate and steer beams towards destined devices. Recent works also propose methods based on angular division multiplexing and a priori aided channel tracking schemes. The results in such proposed solutions suggest that with good beam alignment strategies, the channel throughput can be improved significantly. Moreover, the MAC protocols can also resolve the issue of LOS blockage, where the received power of a user device may undergo deep fading due to the device being held in a manner that blocks the LOS path. Studies have shown that such attenuation by the human body can be as high as 20 dB and 60 gigahertz, and up, it just says and up, I'll read it again. Studies have shown that such attenuation by the human body can be as high as 20 dB and at 60 gigahertz and up. To mitigate the blockage problem, researchers have proposed a multi-hop scheme at the millimeter wave and terahertz bands to form alternate routes. A careful link level scheduling and neighbor discovery process is necessary to achieve high throughput while maintaining low interference. And the final section of this third video is open problems in the terahertz band of communications. Currently, the fabrication and testing of terahertz band antenna arrays remains a relevant challenge. Again, 6 years ago is when this was written. Some techniques based on photolithography, electrobeam lithography, among others, are able to produce the front end with hundreds of plasmonic antenna elements. The utilization of large antenna arrays can extend the signal coverage by forming array radiation patterns with main loads of high directivity, thus forcing energy towards the desired directions. However, such highly directional beams limit coverage in the angular domain, causing low energy efficiency at the transmitter to serve each user. A recent solution, named THZ Prism, has been proposed to form multiple beams with slight frequency shifts towards different directions while maintaining good distance coverage. In addition to other proposed solutions discussed in Section 3C, which was, I think, one of the last two sections we read, to solve the transmission distance problems, this design employs true time delays for RF chains before phase shifters to obtain a prism-like effect, which spreads the original beam into several beams, or beam splitting, I'm guessing is what's being referred to here, each with a slightly different frequency shift with respect to the center frequency. In parallel to the quest for more novel solutions in antenna design, other remaining challenges reside in the control and signal processing schemes associated with transceiver designs in the terahertz band. On the one hand, real-time control algorithms are needed. On the other hand, communication protocols for coordination between the transmitter, receiver, and reflect arrays are needed. Among others, researchers reported a smart reflect array assisted millimeter wave system compatible with IEEE 802.11ad. Besides the design of the reflect array and a study on deployment strategies, a three-way beam searching protocol is developed in which the reflect away coordinates with the transmitter through a 2.4 gigahertz controlled channel in order to discover the best joint transmit and reflect sensors or sectors for which the signal at the receiver is maximized. However, this work does not capture the extended functionalities of plasmonic reflect arrays. Furthermore, when high directional beams are utilized at mobile transceivers A relevant challenge arises from the limited field of view of antenna arrays for each transceiver to locate the next hop to forward its data. Thus, new routing solutions are necessary for terahertz band communications to effectively discover and establish links. A study, which is in the citations of the paper, reports a solution in link discovery at terahertz band using a leaky wave antenna to sense the angular information of a user. And so I hope if you take one thing from this, they are so far advanced in the way that they are using energy to communicate. It's into the photonics level, light. They can do a lot of this with light now, and that's actually just something that's been announced within the last year, at least that I've seen, is that photonics or light based chips and data communications are being announced in the market. So instead of research, and this, this is something that's just being researched, I'm starting to see this come out to market. And I think in 2026, this upcoming year, we're going to see a whole lot more of that. And so keep that in the in the back of your mind. I do know, like I said at the beginning, this very much was a complex and advanced section. I will put plenty of links in the description for other places to reference and learn about terahertz radiation. And with that, guys, I will see you in the next video. Thank you, guys.